In the flickering torchlight of a lavish Roman banquet hall, a young emperor's manic laughter echoes off marble walls. Caligula reclines in gold and purple, eyes glinting with a dangerous glee. Two consuls, Rome's highest statesmen, lie prostrate nearby, trembling. "At a single nod of mine, both of you could have your throats cut on the spot," he muses casually. It is not an empty threat. It is a chilling promise from the most powerful man in the world, a mad emperor who has transformed Rome into his personal theater of cruelty. Fear and debauchery ruled under Caligula's reign. By day, he paraded himself as a living god, demanding divine honors in temples that once worshipped Jupiter and Mars. By night, opulent feasts devolved into surreal nightmares. Noble guests watched in horror as the emperor turned on a whim from gracious host to sadistic tyrant. Parents were forced to attend the executions of their own children. Afterwards, Caligula would invite them to dine at his table, reveling in their grief as if it were entertainment. Whispers in Rome's forums spoke of horrors inside the imperial palace. Orgies, sisters turned to concubines, and a city held hostage by the whims of a deranged god-king. How did Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, Caligula, descend into such depravity? The answer lies in the twisted path of his rise and reign, a tale as dramatic and tragic as any myth Rome ever whispered. His story, at first, began with promise and adoration. Born in 12 AD into the illustrious Julian-Claudian dynasty, he was the son of Germanicus, a beloved war hero, and Agrippina the Elder, granddaughter of Emperor Augustus. As a toddler, Gaius followed his father on military campaigns, charming hardened legionaries by wearing a tiny soldier's uniform, complete with miniature boots. The troops affectionately called him Caligula, meaning little boot, after the child-sized army sandals, caligae, he wore. It was a nickname meant in jest, but it became infamous. In those early years, no one imagined the wide-eyed boy tottering around the camp would become Rome's most notorious tyrant. Tragedy struck Caligula's life early and hard. His father, Germanicus, mysteriously died when Caligula was just 6, possibly poisoned. Rumors blamed Emperor Tiberius, who feared Germanicus's growing popularity. Then came a purge. His mother, Agrippina, and 2 elder brothers were accused of treason and left to rot in exile or prison by Tiberius's decree. Caligula was the last one standing. By 31 AD, Caligula was effectively a political hostage of his great-uncle Tiberius. Summoned to the imperial villa on Capri, he entered a nest of paranoia and perversion. Tiberius was a bitter recluse, infamous for his debauched court. Caligula learned to wear a mask of obedience, suppressing his grief and rage. It was how he survived. No one had ever been a better slave, observers later said of Caligula's subservience, nor a worse master once power was his. Even Tiberius saw the viper beneath the smile. The old emperor reportedly remarked that he was rearing a viper for the Roman people. In March 37 AD, Tiberius died. Some whispered Caligula had a hand in his end. At 24, Caligula ascended the throne. Rome exploded in celebration. The long-oppressed people, tired of Tiberius's cold rule, welcomed Germanicus's son like a divine savior. The Senate and citizens hailed Caligula with hysterical joy. As he entered Rome, crowds filled the streets, chanting, "Our star, our baby," and showering him with praise. Thousands of sacrifices were offered to the gods. And in those early months, Caligula seemed to live up to the love. He granted bonuses to soldiers and freed the imprisoned. The dark cloud over Rome appeared to be lifting. Little Boot had become the golden princeps overnight, and the future looked bright. But the sunshine of public adoration did not last long. Just 6 months into his reign, in autumn 37 AD, Caligula fell gravely ill. Some accounts say it was a fever or poisoning, others suggest encephalitis or an epileptic seizure. For weeks, the emperor hovered near death, delirious and bedridden. The empire held its breath. Thousands kept vigil, offering prayers and pledges to the gods for his recovery. When Caligula regained consciousness, Rome rejoiced. Their beloved little boot had survived. But soon, whispers spread. Caligula the Merciful had returned, changed. Ancient historians marked this illness as the turning point. The once generous, clear-eyed ruler emerged strangely altered, his mind fever-touched, his restraint seemingly gone. Caligula began appearing in outlandish costumes and wigs, perhaps concealing weakness. Then, the eliminations began. Suspicion consumed him. He claimed to see betrayal everywhere. The first to fall was Gemellus, Tiberius's grandson and once co-heir. The accusation, taking preventive medicine, an act Caligula saw as an insult to imperial trust. Next came Macro, the Praetorian prefect who had secured Caligula's rise. Instead of reward, he met a swift downfall, an end shaped by the emperor's growing mistrust. Even his once revered grandmother Antonia was not exempt. When she reportedly voiced concern, she vanished from the stage of power. The purges had begun. With rivals gone, Caligula cast off any illusion of shared rule. He reinstated treason trials, encouraging accusations as a way to claim wealth and crush dissent. The Senate, once Rome's most powerful body, was reduced to trembling obedience. Its members now faced a ruler who mocked them openly, reminding all who held the final word. When Antonia offered quiet counsel, Caligula is said to have replied, "Remember that I have the right to do anything to anybody." This wasn't youthful boldness, it was the voice of unchecked power. He disregarded Senate decrees entirely. At one point, he refused to even meet with them, making clear he no longer saw himself as citizen or princeps, but as something far greater. The mask had fallen. The benevolent prince was gone. Caligula, the tyrant, ruled unchecked. Rome, once proud and civilized, began to rot under the rule of a mad god. His cruelty grew. At the arena, when criminals ran low for beast hunts, Caligula ordered random spectators seized and thrown to the lions. Cheaper than buying meat, he reasoned. At gladiator games, if bored, he'd turn on the audience. Let there be blood was his only care. One poet wrote a satirical verse. Caligula had him burned alive in the amphitheater. Fear became currency. Even at feasts, Caligula summoned prisoners to be tortured for entertainment. Cruelty wasn't a side effect. It was the main course of his reign. At one luxurious dinner, he laughed aloud. The consuls asked what was amusing. "I was just thinking," Caligula smiled, "that at a single nod, I could have both of you killed." The table froze. Then, as if it were a joke, Caligula smiled again. But the message was clear. No one was safe. His humor was a weapon, and every breath near him could be your last. His cruelty spared no class. Senators and knights suffered creative humiliations. Caligula might shave an elder's beard or cut a noble's hair, just to mock their vanity or beauty. Wealthy nobles with long distinguished family names saw them stripped away. Caligula even removed the name Magnus from a descendant of Pompey, as if only he deserved to be called great. To disgrace a senator he viewed as disloyal, Caligula arranged an ambush. As the senator entered the Senate, conspirators stabbed him with styluses and hacked his body to pieces while Caligula watched. Rome became a stage for horror, with Caligula as the director. His sadism wasn't limited to enemies. He turned families into victims, forcing parents to witness their children's executions. One father pleaded illness to avoid his son's execution. Caligula sent a royal litter to bring him, unwilling to let him miss the spectacle. It was cruelty, disguised as twisted hospitality. Another grieving father, invited to dine after his son's execution, was urged to enjoy himself. Caligula laughed and joked, feasting on grief as though it were dessert. His rule was summarized by two chilling quotes. The first, "Let them hate me, so long as they fear me." The second, he wished the Roman people had one neck, so he could strangle them all at once. Rome was held hostage by an emperor who saw lives as toys. His wrath was law, and his pleasure was suffering. But alongside the cruelty came madness in the form of unchecked extravagance. He inherited nearly 3 billion sesterces from Tiberius and set out to spend it all. Games, gladiator fights, lavish displays of power. Caligula outdid them all and did so personally. He threw gold to the crowds in the forum, laughing as they scrambled. At dinners, he served perfume baths and impossible delicacies, even drinking wine mixed with crushed pearls. Food was gilded in gold leaf. "A Caesar," he said, "should be either frugal or impossibly rich." He had no interest in frugality. Wealth wasn't a means, it was a stage prop. Most symbolic of his madness was the floating bridge at Baiae. An astrologer had mocked him, saying he'd never rule. Caligula built a bridge across the bay to ride his horse over the sea. Dressed as Alexander the Great, he rode across the water. For 2 days, he paraded. On the second, he invited Rome's elite for a feast, then began throwing guests into the sea for fun. When some clung to the pontoons, Caligula watched soldiers pry their fingers loose with boat hooks, ensuring they drowned. Murder was his punchline. Power was his joke. This bridge, ambitious, theatrical, and deadly, perfectly captured Caligula's essence. But spending like a god drained the treasury. Within a year, his riches were nearly gone. To raise funds, he turned tyrant taxman. He created levies on food, lawsuits, marriages, even prostitution. Nothing was beneath him if it meant refilling his empty coffers. He posted tax laws in tiny writing, too high to read, ensuring people broke them and paid fines. When they protested, he laughed and raised the signs even higher. It was all a game to him. One of his most outrageous ideas, converting part of the imperial palace into a brothel. It was filled with noble sons and daughters, forced into state-sponsored prostitution. By day, these youths and matrons of high standing were paraded in palace halls, and by night, they stood on display. For any paying client, Caligula's agents could lure in from the streets. The emperor even sent his servants into the forums and marketplaces to advertise the imperial brothel, calling men of all ages to come enjoy themselves for a price. The fees, of course, flowed straight to Caligula's treasury. He had clerks meticulously record the names of all who paid for these services, perhaps to blackmail them or flaunt their submission. This degradation of Rome's noble youth, effectively sex trafficking orchestrated by the emperor, horrified many but silenced all. Who would dare protest? Disapproval could be lethal. Caligula's appetite for raising funds also led him to shameless acts of personal greed. He took to hosting pretend auctions of slaves, furniture, and treasures taken from executed nobles. One famous incident involved a wealthy Roman knight named Aponius, who dozed off at an auction. Caligula quietly told the auctioneer to take every nod as a bid. By the time Aponius jolted awake, he had accidentally bought 13 gladiators for an enormous sum, nearly ruining himself. Caligula laughed it off. It was a joke and a payday. On another occasion, Caligula learned that a rich man had bribed palace staff for a dinner invite. The next day, a centurion delivered the man an IOU, billing him the exact amount of his bribe. Extortion wore the mask of humor in Caligula's Rome. His personal life was as scandalous as his public acts. His sexual perversity became the gossip of the entire empire. The most incendiary rumor, that Caligula committed incest with all three of his sisters, Agrippina, Drusilla, and Livilla. Ancient writers like Suetonius claimed he used them as lovers. These alleged acts happened even at drunken banquets, in front of guests. His favorite was said to be Julia Drusilla, whom he adored obsessively and flaunted at court like an empress. He reportedly took Drusilla from her husband and later named her heir to the throne in his will. When she died, suddenly in 38 AD, Caligula's grief was disturbingly intense. He howled and wept as though he'd lost a wife, not a sister. Then, in a historic and disturbing move, he decreed divine honors for her, declaring the dead Drusilla a goddess. This unprecedented act, making a Roman woman, and a sister at that, into an official deity, fueled the lurid speculation that their relationship had indeed been far more than sibling affection. Some contemporary writers, like Philo of Alexandria, who was present at Caligula's court, noted no obvious incestuous behavior and chalked the rumors up to malicious gossip. But the very fact that Romans found the tales credible speaks to Caligula's notorious breach of taboos. Beyond his sisters, Caligula treated virtually any person as a potential sexual conquest. Wives of prominent senators, and even the wives of his own commanders, caught the emperor's roving eye. It became routine for Caligula to invite a couple to dine, only to take the wife by the hand mid-meal, lead her into his bedroom, and violate her while her husband sat helpless outside. Moments later, Caligula would return to the table, wiping his mouth as if nothing were amiss, and casually appraise the woman's performance to her face and her husband's. He offered crude critiques of her intimate charms. He sometimes even dispatched written divorce orders to husbands of the women he slept with. This effectively ended marriages by imperial decree and added public insult to private injury. No marital bond or social decency was respected in Caligula's court. Lust was just another arena in which he could exhibit his power. Caligula himself married 4 times in his short life, in rapid succession and often in outrageous circumstances. He wed his first wife, Junia Claudilla, for love, or so it seemed. But she died in childbirth before his rise to emperor. He then abruptly stole a bride named Livia Orestilla on the day of her wedding to another man, crashing the festivities, seducing her, and declaring her his wife. Within months, he grew bored and banished her. A similar fate befell his third wife, Lollia Paulina, whom he ordered to divorce her husband and marry him. This was because he'd heard she was exceptionally beautiful. That union, too, was short-lived. He exiled Lollia after scant time. Finally came Milonia Caesonia, a woman of neither youthful age nor notable beauty, already a mother from a previous liaison, but she seemed to enthrall Caligula. Caesonia was notorious for her wild extravagance and reportedly matched Caligula's debauchery with her own. He introduced her to his troops and courtiers completely nude on at least one occasion to boast of her physical allure. Despite her flaws, Caligula loved Caesonia with uncharacteristic faithfulness and passion. She would bear him a daughter, Julia Drusilla, named in honor of his late sister. Caesonia remained by his side to the bloody end. Some whispered she slipped Caligula potent love philters to keep his affection, aphrodisiacs that might have worsened his mental state. Whether or not that's true, Caligula's unhinged conduct only escalated in the last year of his reign. And Caesonia was always there, a constant, oddly devoted presence amid the madness. By 39 to 40 AD, Caligula's delusions of grandeur had burst all bounds. He began to insist upon being treated not merely as an emperor, but as a living god on earth. In public ceremonies, he increasingly appeared in the costumes of various deities, one day garbed in a cloak carrying Jupiter's thunderbolt, the next in a silky gown and jeweled necklace as if he were Venus. He took to wearing a golden fake beard at times, aping the look of the god Apollo. In Rome, Caligula had a temple to his own divinity erected. Inside stood a colossal golden statue of Caligula that was dressed each morning in the same outfit he planned to wear that day. Priests of this temple sacrificed to the genius of Caligula, effectively worshipping him as a god. Ancient sources claim Caligula even extended this vanity to a cosmic scale. He supposedly would carry on one-sided conversations with Jupiter, whispering and suddenly shouting as if arguing with the deity. On other nights, he was said to invite the moon goddess for a private rendezvous, offering his own bed to Luna. These stories border on the surreal, and some might be exaggerations, but they circulated widely. They are a testament to how unmoored from reality Caligula's behavior had become. In the emperor's own mind, it seemed he truly was a divine being, superior to all mortals. Caligula's push for godlike status had dangerous political repercussions. In one controversial episode, Caligula ordered a statue of himself to be placed inside a highly revered temple in Jerusalem. The local population was deeply alarmed, fearing this would violate their sacred traditions. They pleaded with Roman officials to postpone the order. Luckily for them, Caligula's death came before the statue was installed, likely preventing widespread unrest. The incident reflected how far the emperor's ego had grown. He seemed to expect admiration and reverence from every corner of the empire. There were even rumors that he planned to move the Roman capital to Alexandria, where rulers were historically honored as divine figures. Whether true or not, the idea symbolized a growing distance between Caligula and his people. What had begun as firm leadership was turning into something far more extreme. Frustration with his behavior spread across every level of Roman society. The Senate had lost its power and dignity, and many members watched in silence as their influence vanished. Military leaders were increasingly unsettled by the emperor's erratic behavior. Even the Roman public, once supportive, began to suffer as new taxes and economic demands grew harsher by 41 AD. But Caligula's biggest challenge came from within. The Praetorian Guard, his elite protectors, had grown wary of his constant mood swings and unpredictable commands. He frequently tested their loyalty with unsettling mind games, making accusations one day, offering praise the next. Among those affected was a senior officer named Cassius Chaerea. Caligula reportedly singled him out with repeated mockery. The emperor would give him demeaning passwords and make public jokes at his expense, which deeply offended the seasoned soldier. These insults left a lasting impact. By late 40 AD, Chaerea and a group of fellow officers and officials began quietly forming a plan. They would attempt something no one had dared: the removal of an emperor. The moment came on January 24th, 41 AD, during a public festival on Rome's Palatine Hill. Caligula attended the games, but was reportedly in poor spirits that day, troubled by unsettling dreams and bad omens. At midday, he left the stands through a covered walkway, an ideal place for a quiet moment away from the crowd. But waiting in that corridor were the conspirators. They acted quickly, confronting Caligula before he could escape. The emperor resisted, but he was overpowered. In the end, Caligula fell not in battle or by foreign enemy, but at the hands of his own inner circle. The Palatine Hill was alive with festivities for a set of games that Caligula was presenting. Despite the winter chill, spirits were high among the spectators. Caligula, however, was in a foul mood that day. Ancient accounts suggest bad omens had plagued him: sleeplessness, nightmares, collapsing statues, lightning strikes. Still, The emperor attended the games, watching gladiators clash and performers entertain. At noon, during the intermission, Caligula left the spectator box and descended via a covered passage beneath the theater. He was perhaps heading to take a respite in the palace. It was in that dim corridor, away from the crowds, that Chaerea and his fellow conspirators struck. Suddenly, a throng of armed men, some Praetorians, some civilian conspirators, closed in on Caligula. Chaerea was the first to lash out, shouting, "Strike again!" as he slashed the emperor. Others followed in a frenzied assault. Blades plunged into Caligula from every side. The young emperor cried out in shock, desperately trying to fend off the blows, and reportedly screamed, "I'm still alive!" as he staggered and fell. But the assassins gave no mercy. They stabbed Caligula again and again. By some reports, 30 stab wounds were inflicted. So many that even in his death throes, the once arrogant ruler's body jerked like a grotesque puppet on tangled strings. In the hateful fury of the moment, one attacker drove his sword through Caligula's genitals, a final vengeance for the emperor's sexual crimes and insults. Thus, in a puddle of blood on a palace corridor, Caligula, the self-proclaimed god, died at the hands of his own guard. The conspirators, however, were not finished. They knew to truly uproot Caligula's regime, they must eliminate his family. In a nearby room, Caesonia was cradling their little daughter, Julia Drusilla, not yet 2 years old. Bursting in with swords drawn, a Praetorian rushed at Caesonia. "Do your worst," she supposedly cried, loyal to her deranged husband to the end. The centurion ran his blade through Caesonia, killing the empress on the spot. Another brute seized the wailing toddler and, in an act of unspeakable cruelty, smashed the child's head against a wall. In a matter of minutes, the house of Caligula was annihilated in gore. When news of Caligula's assassination filtered out, chaos and uncertainty gripped Rome. At first, people could not believe it. Some thought it was a trick, a test by the emperor to see who would celebrate his death. But as the terrible truth sank in, many senators rejoiced behind closed doors. At last, the tyrant was gone. Emboldened, the Senate convened hurriedly, even meeting in the Capitol instead of the Senate House, tainted with the name Julian. There was talk of restoring the Roman Republic, sweeping away the title of emperor that Augustus had established. Some senators suggested that all images of the Caesars be destroyed, their temples dismantled, and their memory damned. Caligula, they vowed, would receive a damnatio memoriae, his name erased from inscriptions, his statues hurled down. Yet even in death, Caligula managed one last twist of fate. While the Senate debated the Republic's return, a contingent of the Praetorian Guard had found Caligula's uncle, Claudius, hiding behind a curtain. The guards, motivated perhaps by loyalty to the imperial institution or hope for reward, spontaneously acclaimed Claudius as the new emperor. By the point of a sword, the Praetorians made the Senate back down. The monarchy would continue. The mad emperor was gone, but his imperial throne would live on in another form. So Caligula's death, rather than restoring the old order, ushered in a new reign, one far more stable and sane under Claudius. In the aftermath, Rome tried to purge the nightmare of Caligula's tyranny. The young emperor's body was hastily and ignominiously buried in a shallow grave at the Lamian Gardens. Only a cursory cremation was given. It's said that his sisters, returning from exile later, quietly disinterred his remains and properly burned and entombed them, perhaps out of familial piety. Superstitious rumors claimed that the site of Caligula's assassination became haunted with phantom screams. The palace where he died was plagued by ghostly apparitions until it was finally destroyed by fire. The Senate's decree of damnatio memoriae saw to it that public references to Gaius Caligula were chiseled off monuments. Coins bearing his face were melted down. It was as if Rome itself wanted to wipe away the stain of his reign. But Caligula's legacy could not be so easily erased. The people of Rome and the world remembered. How could they not? He had shocked the conscience of the empire. In the years and centuries that followed, writers like Suetonius and Cassius Dio ensured Caligula's name lived in infamy. They recorded every lurid tale and outrage for posterity, drawing on the memories of those who survived the terror. They painted Caligula as the archetype of a depraved tyrant, a cautionary tale of absolute power gone mad. Some later historians suggested that these accounts were exaggerated, distorted by the Senate's hatred, or colored by gossip. Modern analyses often question how much of Caligula's monstrous reputation was earned and how much was embellished by his enemies. Perhaps the line between truth and myth blurred in the aftermath, as happens with the most infamous figures. But even stripping away the hyperbole, what remains is disturbing enough. Caligula's 4-year reign, 37 to 41 AD, stands as a brief but blistering ordeal that tested Rome's resilience. He had taken the greatest empire on earth and plunged it into an abyss of vice, paranoia, and violence. Caligula's life and death embody the oldest lessons about the corrupting nature of unrestrained power. Here was a man who began his rule amidst overwhelming love, the cherished descendant of Augustus and Germanicus. He was welcomed like a godsend, yet swiftly became a monster. His story forces us to wonder, was the madness always inside him, merely unleashed by opportunity? Or did the dizzying heights of absolute authority break his mind and morality? As emperor, Caligula deified himself and debased everyone else, demanding worship while showing contempt for human life. In trying to become a god, he lost every shred of his own humanity. He turned Rome, the capital of law, order, and civilization, into a city of orgies, massacres, and terror. It became a corrupted mirror of his own psychosis. Caligula's reign lasted only 1,400 days, but its infamy has spanned 2 millennia. His name has become a byword for sadistic tyranny and deranged decadence. In the corridors of history, one can still hear the echo of his laughter as men begged for mercy. We can still picture the gold-dripped banquets ending in blood. We can still feel the chill that gripped Rome when an emperor proclaimed, "Let them hate me, so long as they fear me." Caligula's legacy reminds us of the fragility of civilized order, how quickly it can crumble when one man's madness is given free rein. Rome survived Caligula, but it did not forget him. His shadow lingered as a grim warning to future emperors of what unchecked dominion and godlike delusions could wrought. To this day, the tragic tale of Caligula, the sadistic tyrant who fancied himself a god, stands as one of history's starkest examples. It's a lesson in how absolute power tends not only to corrupt, but to destroy utterly. The horror he unleashed serves as an eternal, cautionary specter. It reminds the world that the line between ruler and ruin, between majesty and monstrosity, is perilously thin when madness wears the crown. If this twisted tale of madness and power kept you on the edge, there's more where that came from. Subscribe to Histoeureka for more dark chapters of history they don't teach in school. Hit the like button if Caligula shocked you, and drop a comment. Do you think absolute power made him mad? Or was the monster always there? Share this video with a fellow history lover, and remember, history is full of horrors we're only beginning to uncover.